Welcome to the Renton Rathbun Show. I am your host, Renton Rathbun. And hey, this is a show for parents. And if you're not a parent, I think you'll still find the information you get from this show very, very interesting and important as well. But we really want parents to be armed. Parents, whether you have kids still at home or you have kids that are adults now and have left the home, or those adult kids have come back. Whatever it is, whether you're a grandparent or you even might be someone that mentors others, whatever it is, this show is designed to help you identify worldviews that have been risen up against the knowledge of God, and then how do we respond to that biblically? Now, this show is unedited. It's it's pretty raw. The show is also from the studios of BGU Press, so we're very grateful to them. But what this show, I hope, accomplishes for you is to start giving you this awareness of what's going on in our world. Today is going to be a pretty interesting day because we are going to talk about Disney and everything from how Disney has become what it is today to how it was back when I was growing up, Generation X, to what it looks like today, and then especially how it affects our children. I know a lot of you probably are aware that Disney has gotten quite woke, and we also are aware that Disney found that didn't pay off so well. So now everyone's wondering, well, what do we do with Disney? What I want to show you today is, of course, some of the obvious stuff. What we're going to talk about is the stuff that's a little harder to see. So with me today is Sharyn Robertson. She is a professor of film.
Yes.
Now that is exciting. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and with that?
All right. Well, ever since I was little, I wanted to know everything about movies, and not just, not just watching movies, but how movies were made. And it was just this fascination. And so as I was getting older and trying to figure out what should I do for the rest of my life, I'm like, well, lawyers make money, or should I be a counselor? And then it was very clear that I still loved movies. And my dad said, you should actually study filmmaking. I'm like, I never thought about doing that for a career.
How old were you when he said
I was
that?
in 11th grade, because that was the time you've really got to buckle down. What are you going to do with your future? We're going to pay for college, so make a decision. So 11th grade was yeah, that's what I want to do. And so when I came to school, I knew exactly. And so I studied film. I got a master's in film, and then I got my MFA as well, because I love film that much. And I never planned on teaching. I just wanted to work in the industry in some way, because I loved all aspects. And sometimes people say, I just want to be a director. I want to be an editor. And I'm like, I just want to be involved. And so when the Lord called me back to teach, it was very clear. And it was something I'm like, okay, this is now the path. And now I love being able to teach other young filmmakers and see the excitement that they have of the excitement that I used to have. And this is exactly where I want to be right now.
Okay, for some of our listeners, they might be thinking, okay, well, what do you do in a class on film? Do you just watch movies and you talk about it? I mean, what are some of the nuances of film that you teach?
So, for example, I just taught a class the other day of talking about studying the opening of films, or the opening of anything. I'm a filmmaker, but it applies to any kind of visual. So how do they hook you? How do they set up the genre? How do they set up the scene? How do you set up the character? How do you make a character likable? Because when we watch a film, we want to connect to it. And so we're teaching our students what are the elements to put in there in order for your audience to connect. Because I'm sure everybody's watched a film and said, I didn't like it. And so we figure out, why didn't you like it? What are the things that happened? And bad acting is one, obviously, but we really dive into that visual communication. And so I also teach sound class and sound design. And I have friends who say, oh, I didn't know they did sound after the film. After you shot the scene, I didn't know that someone went in and put in the thunder, or put in the siren happening as a girl is panicking about a moment. We hear a siren in the background. Okay. So that's what we're studying in our classes, of how to Manipulate is a bad word, but we're trying to move their emotions to feel the way they're supposed to feel what's happening in the scene.
Okay.
So,
Well, we have, we did a show already on Wicked, the movie,
uh-huh.
and on that show we had Topher Zeidowitz with us, and he told us that everything is by choice, nothing is by chance.
Mhm.
And he explained that a little bit, but maybe you'd explain it better. How would you explain that?
It's funny when I was graduating, we had to do a senior film, and it was called Not by Chance, because it is you always have a POV, a point of view. You always have the director, and so even I'm a big reality TV fan because I love studying human behavior, and so I love seeing how they're acting, and I know scenes are set up, and that's I think also why I love it so much of how they're directing these characters who are real. But there's always somebody behind that camera and pointing it. And then I will talk about we talk about cinema verite, and this is like life untouched. And so it's just the idea the director is just kind of recording what's happening. I'm like, yes, but they're also choosing what angle of that person.
Mm,
And even with the sound, they're choosing maybe a mic is further away so they don't sound as present and they
mm,
sound a little weak when they're trying to talk. And
yeah.
so that is it's by choice. You are putting this camera and the sound in a situation that you know exactly what you're trying to accomplish.
I have noticed with old movies, at the very beginning of the movie, they have this weird, background with, like flowers and decoration, and then the words of who directed, who's starring in it, and then they start the movie. And I've noticed, in today's movies, even that has become strategic. They,
Mhm.
even as you start seeing, who wrote it, who directed, who is the casting director, and all that sort of junk, they're already starting the movie. They're already trying to get you set up for things.
Mhm.
And so even that has now become part of how to guide people into
Mhm.
what you're doing. So what makes these kind of films, especially for kids, why is film so powerful when it comes to how it directs kids and makes them think about things? Why is film so important? Why not just reading a story or something like that? What's the trick going on?
Well, you always know the visual captures our attention a lot faster than sitting down and reading. And if there's that movement, we're just drawn, our brains are drawn to follow that and to watch it. The colors that are used, the animation. I have a 5 and a 7-year old, so animated TV and movies are a big part of my life. And I
Mhm.
watch them and think, oh, this is so boring or so cheesy, but I'm not the audience. So
Yeah.
they know that, the excited kids and they always are going on adventure and there's always something happening, or the sound effects that are used are these happier boings or binks or these kind of cute that are
Yeah.
going to draw kids in because the toys I play with are the sounds that the bing bing bing, and then they'll watch it on a film. There's that connection there,
Okay.
and so the excitement of what the characters are doing, and they're very short, like we'll do this and we'll do this and we'll do this, and so it's easy to follow along for them and they don't have to wait for a lot of dialogue or the setup of the
Yeah.
scene. And so, it's very exciting as opposed to now I need to sit down and read the words and
Yeah, I've noticed that. Now, some of my favorite movies are the Lego movies, I'll be honest with you. But they are just like flash scene of this, flash scene of that, flash scene of this. Do you think some of that is designed around a kid who, the kids of today who, where I guess every child born today has ADHD now. And so, these movies seem to be fast, 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 fast. To sit and listen to a dialogue and figure out what's being said obviously does not appeal to kids. And so they've found a way to make everything so quick, but you can still kind of follow it. Um, do you think that as we start transitioning to talk about Disney, what what specific um, strategies, as we think about everything by choice, nothing by chance, what kind of specific strategies has you think Disney has locked on to get kids immediately immersed in their stories?
I think it's all character based for one. I mean, you're going to have to love the characters, and that's the same for children's films to adult films, older films of understanding who the character is because you have to follow a character. And so they'll
Mhm.
make these lovable characters or even the way that they're shaped or they look, could it be a little different that it will appeal to the kids. And
Mhm.
they'll love following I mean Mickey Mouse. I mean that's a great example. Mickey Mouse, the way he talks is this unique way and
Mm.
he's energetic and he's fun. And so you get if you bring them into the characters, then they want to watch everything with those characters.
Mm.
And then you will go to Disney World to meet these characters
Yeah.
and get so excited because you've been watching all of these. So I think they draw you in, and that's with everything. You're drawn in because you want to watch this character, this person,
Mm.
this animated thing. And they're very good. They have great storytellers over there in order that can connect very quickly to kids. And I'm sure there's a lot of studies that they've done of what's going to be the best way, what colors to use, what sounds to use.
Yeah.
And then so once you connect them to that character, they're going to want to keep watching that character.
Can you explain for our audience what Disneyfication? I think I said that right. The Disneyfication of things of stories. So like, if you ever, I'm sorry, if you ever read Pinocchio,
Mhm.
the actual story of Pinocchio is quite horrifying.
Traumatic,
Yeah,
yes.
it's traumatizing to anyone that reads it. Um, but Pinocchio, when I think of Pinocchio, a lot of people think of Disney.
Mhm.
What does Disneyfication mean?
It is taking a story. I remember specifically The Little Mermaid. I remember my mother reading us The Little Mermaid, the actual version, and thinking because the rest of her life she's walking on what feels like blades or knives every time she walks because that was her punishment from excuse me from going and wanting to be a human. So there had to be some kind of consequence. And I remember hating that. Like, I still think about that. I'm like, what an awful way to live. And so when The Little Mermaid came out that Disney did, none of that is in there. And you see this happily ever after. And I remember watching that thinking, yes. And so they're taking these stories that have major consequences to their actions, which is real life, right? We have consequences to our actions. But they're taking it to be like, no, it can all be okay at the end. No matter what you do, no matter you go
Mm,
against your father or you go against the creator, it's all going to be okay at the end.
yeah.
You'll live happily ever after.
So that's a great way of putting it. Taking consequences away. See, I've been teaching college students for over 25 years. And when I ask them, throughout and this is, from the 90s when I first started teaching to recently, I've seen the same thing in kids when I ask them, so, what you majoring in? They'll say the major. I say, what do you want to do with that? And like, I'm not sure. And you're like, okay, not sure. Why, and they're like, well, it'll work out. I mean, they just have this
Yeah.
idea that
Yeah.
everything will work out and that even the things they do that they know are harmful to them, they think, well, that will hurt other people, but it will work out for me. There's this, so I just want to, I'm not saying this is all because of Disney, but I am saying there is this human desire, I think probably since the fall, where we know that there are certain activities that people do that have bad consequences, but for me, everything will be okay. So I want to explore that for a minute. When you start thinking about tell me about a particular Disney film, and then walk us through. Let's do Little Mermaid. Walk us through that and tell us what's really going on when we're talking about the relationship that Ariel has with her father, and what that really means, and then going to getting her legs and all that sort of stuff. What's really going on behind all that? What's the if I can put it this way, just the little agenda that's being pushed there?
No, it's funny because my favorite Disney film, the one that we wore out the VHS tape growing up, was Little Mermaid, and I watched it because it was always happy, and you didn't pick up on these other elements of you knew she was angry at her father and going against her dad, but we're rooting for her. Yes, she needs to be a human, and he doesn't understand. And now as a parent, I'm like, oh goodness, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Like she is defying her father. she's not getting advice from him. In fact, she's telling him what she's going to do, and then she does it, and he has to deal with it. And she is a 15, 16-year-old girl who's doing this. And then he, sends people to help be his eyes, and then she's telling them how wrong they are and listen to me. And she does have a consequence. I mean, the evil witch takes her voice and all of that. But again, her father kind of learns a lesson of like, oh yeah, you were right the whole time, which is very dangerous for kids who might pick up on that of, oh, I might know more than my parents. And Disney's very good about the child knowing more than the parents. And that is a very common theme that they have. And it's very innocent when you're watching it when you're younger. And now it's like, and I remember my parents were very much making sure we knew who was in charge. But if you have these parents who are kind of letting TV and Disney, which is safe in their minds, raise their kids, these themes are very prevalent of the child knows best, or we need to get rid of the parents for the child to succeed. And that can be very dangerous.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot where, not just Little Mermaid, but there is that sense, because they have to have it because they want to win over the audience who are children. Children don't want to be told your mom and dad do know best. They want to be told you got it. And so, and I've noticed this even with social media. Social media has really pushed this because what happens is these kids, the algorithms of social media wants you to keep your eyes on the screen. And so what they'll do is they'll keep recycling or bringing in people that agree with your positions as they figure out what you're saying on there and what you're liking and what you're, not liking or whatever. So as kids keep seeing that, look at the whole world agrees with me. This idea of authority becomes more and more of an issue. That your real authority is how you feel. And isn't that kind of the push, even in Little Mermaid, you feel love. There's something you feel in here. And your parents won't understand. And I don't know I can't remember the plot. Where was Ariel's mother? Was she dead?
In a prequel to The Little Mermaid, they have said she has passed away, but that's essentially the idea. She has passed away.
Okay. And so if you're a parent in a Disney film, is that a good place to be?
You're going to die. I'm sorry. You're going to die, or if you don't die, then you have a very small part in the film.
Yes. And you have to repent at the end that your child was right and you were wrong and you're so sorry.
Thankfully, your child taught you a lesson.
Yes. Can you give us another Disney film that might be kind of popular that kind of puts parents in that same position of learning a lesson from the wisdom of their children? I'm sorry I put you on.
Yeah,
on the spot
well, I
there.
think Finding Nemo, you have this very overprotective father, and so Nemo says, "I know best. I can go on the journey." And again, there are issues that happens when he goes away from his authority. But at the end, the father's like, "Oh, you're right. You should have been able to do this." And so Nemo had to say, "In my timing, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to wait for my father's timing." And sometimes these kids, we don't, our parents have a reason for something, and we don't understand it. But ultimately, we are required by God to obey your parents no matter what, unless obviously they go against Scripture. And so you see these films, well, these kids are going to go against their parents, and it's going to work out. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think I see that in Finding Nemo. That dad's like, "Oh yeah, I was overprotective, and good thing you did this, so I learned to be a different person now."
Yeah.
And that can be very dangerous
And very tempting to a kid.
Yes.
Who is already, and this is the genius of Disney films, is that they're tapping into something that kids are already convinced of. What they need is a picture on a screen that shows them that they're right, and they'll love that. So going back to this idea of how things are driven in Disney films, we see this connection, the way they try to connect the kid to their heart, not their parents. So if they're connected to their heart, a lot of these are romance stories. When you think about everything from Sleeping Beauty and Snow White, which I think Snow White's going to be coming out soon, or if this is broadcast at a time that it's already out. And they had to put that on hold because Snow
A
White.
lot of controversy with
Yeah,
that
uh,
already.
wanted to be an activist. So a lot of these tend to be romance. Is there anything wrong with teaching our kids, showing them romance on a screen?
So that if you ask me my favorite genre of film, it's romantic comedies. I was drawn to all the princesses. I love romance, and when I hear like a film was coming out that didn't have it, like Lion King, and I guess it had its some, but it was really about the father and the son. I'm like, oh, it didn't appeal to me as much because I want the happily ever after. I want the prince and the princess. And I think we're just drawn to that. And I don't think that that is wrong in the sense of being drawn, but I think as parents, and again, I go back to I had very, very, very good parents that would limit our time of what we could watch, could always knew what we were watching, but always made sure that what does the Bible say? And I think
Mhm.
if films aren't going to change, if films are going to keep doing this agenda, and I never say stay away from films because I'm a filmmaker, and so I want people to watch what I produce, but but parents have got to be involved when they're seeing these themes and make sure, not say, look how wrong they are, but make sure what it does scripture say and constantly be bringing before them a real loving relationship and what does love mean. And I think
Mhm.
if you don't have that part, if parents aren't doing that part and just letting them be raised by films, it's going to be very dangerous for the kids. And I know, again, with me, with rom-coms, I was very drawn to that. And I knew if I didn't have godly parents telling me, Sharon, this is not real love, and this is make
Mhm.
believe, and it would have been very easy for me to go into this romantic of this is what a relationship would be. And
Mhm.
that would be very difficult later on. So I think parents have got to be involved because, again, Disney's not going to change their way of love because the creators are not Christians. And you might
Mhm.
have some Christians working on it, which is great, but ultimately these directors, they don't profess Christ. So they're not going to change their way of love. But we need to understand that while watching it.
I want to compare as far as love goes. I
Mhm.
want to compare to two Disney films. Okay, so
Okay.
um, and particularly romantic love. So I'd like to compare what was going on with Ariel and what was it, Peter or
Eric.
Eric?
Eric.
Yes, nice,
Prince Eric.
Prince Eric. Yes, and so I wanted to compare that with what was going on with Let It Go, the
Frozen.
Frozen.
Hmm.
Frozen, obviously, the love they wanted to emphasize there, of course, was sisterly love, which was interesting. But there was still romance in there.
Hmm.
So I want to compare those two things. When Ariel was looking at Prince Eric, and she was willing to do all this sacrificing to get to him.
Hmm.
What was the film showing that made Eric worthy of this sacrifice?
Yeah. And again, when you're little, you don't think about that. But when older, he does nothing. And I will say, what is interesting when they did the live action version of Little Mermaid, they tried to make his character have more depth to it
Hmm.
because I think they kind of realized, okay, more adults are going to be watching this one,
Hmm.
and we need to make something with him and make him a little bit more like a reason why she would fall in love with him. But yeah, he doesn't. She just loves him just because he's human and the way he looks. I mean,
Yes.
it's purely based on the way he looks, not his personality, none of that.
Hmm.
He doesn't even know her, and then they fall in love and get married. And
Yeah.
it's so superficial
Yeah.
that you don't think about that, but yeah.
Well,
It's
and the crab, made all that happen
the crab was
for the.
great with that,
Yeah.
yes.
So I think the real problem is we just don't have enough crabs in the world to help us fall in love.
Whispering in our ear what to do.
So, but what I notice about that, and I think a lot of parents that have teenagers will relate to this, is that does appeal to kids because oftentimes we will have, if you have a teenager, they're gonna come home, and if you've done a lot of good work, maybe they'll tell you about someone they like. And when you ask them, okay, well, what is it you like about this person? It's at that point that most teenagers start lying. Because they'll say, oh, they just love the Lord so much, and I just love that they love the Lord. And you're like, well, what if they were like gross and ugly and loved the Lord? Would you still?
Yeah.
And of course they wouldn't. And who knows if they know if they love? They don't know if they love the Lord. And so they start making all this junk up about what you think you would want to hear, so that they can like the person they like. And when you really dig deep, there is very little other than a status that kid might hold, that they fall in love with, the looks, and a lot of times even the looks has something to do with some kind of fantasy they have in their mind about what they think this will look like if we're together. And a lot of kids are not taught about what it means, what falling in love means. Now, I think you caught on to something that, okay, well, Disney understands, okay, well, we don't want to sound superficial either. So we have to redo this, in the live action, that this guy has, some depth to them, whatever they think that means.
He has lines now. He has a lot more dialogue in the other one.
He's just not looking into the sea with his beautiful chin.
Yeah.
But in Frozen,
it's one of the most popular Disney films out there, but
and I just despise it so much. It's fine.
Let it go. It's okay.
Yeah, thank you. That's good advice. I wonder if I can get more advice like that. So the girl that we can identify with, the one that does not have superpowers, just wants to be with her sister, and whatnot, and her sister has a conniption and runs off with her superpowers, and everyone, and little girls love that, because today's answer to anything that's tough is running away. And that's a whole nother story I could talk about, where our screen time has taught us, I don't have to deal with this. And then when you're face to face with someone, the only way to swipe away from someone is to walk away. And I've seen that a whole lot more, where kids are just walking away because they don't want to deal with it. Anyway, Ice Queen. But the one we're supposed to like,
Anna.
What's the other one?
Elsa.
Oh, I'm so glad they made the name so different to help us old people out. Can it just be Sally and Janice or something? Anyway, it's
not
fine.
Exotic at all.
It's
That's
not.
not
Yeah,
exciting.
that's right. Janices never have superpowers. So, okay, what was the one I was supposed to like again? Anna. So we see this rumbly, tumbly guy that has a weird relationship with his moose, and they, he's.
It's a reindeer.
Oh, is it a reindeer? Okay.
Sorry. I mean, if we're going to be exact here.
Yes, we want to be accurate. If this show is anything, it's accurate. So you're welcome. Yeah. But anyway, okay, his reindeer. And, he knows what it's like to be out in the snow, and he's trying to buy supplies and whatnot. So we get to know him a little better. He's not like a Prince Eric that just looks out into the ocean and ponders the world. But this guy does stuff. He's useful. Okay? And so I think, as a man, I'm thinking, when I'm thinking, I have a daughter. She's only 10, but the panic started when we first got her. So, what I'm always thinking is, why do young ladies always attract themselves to useless guys? And by useless, I mean like the bad boy. The bad boy, she's going to change him or whatever. And it's always really, bad boy just means useless kid that doesn't know how to, engage the world, so he does stupid things. Anyway. So this kid seems to be kind of useful. And we get to know him a little bit, and then they run into each other, and you have the meet cute. You want to explain what a meet cute is?
It's the first time that the two characters are going to be the love interests will meet each other, and it needs to be a memorable situation. And a lot of times it actually happens that they're angry at each other the first time they meet, but there's something that brings them together that's usually a memorable occasion.
Yeah. Do you remember the meet cute for frozen?
Yes, because she was angry at him. It was
Okay.
because she was buying something, then he came in and kind of like took over, and
Oh, that's right.
and so she was
Yes.
annoyed, and then she's like, "Oh, wait a minute, he can actually help me." So
Okay.
and that helps. I think those situations as a filmmaker, I love those type of things where they're angry at each other because then you're like, "Oh, how are they going to get together?" And we're trying kind of cheering them on, like, "Okay,
Yeah.
who's going to change and who's going to do what?" So
So there's sparks.
yes,
Whether they're sparks of anger that turn to sparks of love,
yes,
blah, blah,
exactly.
blah. Okay. And we know that at that point, if I remember correctly, I have not seen this movie in a long time, nor have I seen it multiple times. So I'm just trying to hang on. So at this point, when she first meets him, she's already kind of committed to the guy that turns out,
Yes.
spoiler alert, turns out bad.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen the movie, you know,
She's already engaged to somebody.
okay, that she's already engaged
Yes.
to somebody. Okay, that definitely turns out to be the bad guy. I don't want to spoil the movie, but if I have, good.
There's like a rule. If it's been out for so many years, it's okay to spoil it. That's what I told my
Yeah,
students
that's right.
yesterday. I told them the ending of a movie. I'm like, it's been out since I was in high school, so it's okay.
I
They're
think
like,
it should be called the Sixth Sense.
That's what it
rule.
was. The movie I spoiled for them.
The Sixth Sense
It was
rule.
the Sixth Sense.
Okay, yeah, if they haven't seen it by now,
Exactly.
then they don't deserve this surprise. Okay, so anywho, we do get to know this guy better, and we kind of like him better than the fruity guy that she's interested in, and because he seems to be kind of useless, but this guy seems useful. So I kind of like that better. What do you think in this movie they were trying to accomplish with that romance? Because obviously, there's that triangle of the engaged fruity guy, the useful guy, and her, and that's interesting. Did they just do that as this will add some interest to this movie, or do you think there's something behind all that when they're doing those kind of plots and that romance?
Oh, I think it was. I mean, it's obviously not the main storyline because the main storyline are these two sisters. And I think if it's just this girl movie about these two girls, we're losing kind of the boy audience. Because when my
Mm,
boys watch it, they love it, but they love Hans and Sven and oh goodness, his name's not Hans, that's the bad guy. I forget his name now. Anyway, but they love that. They love that part, the reindeer part. And
yeah.
so I think that helps draw us in. So they know, okay, if we have this kind
Okay.
of rough and tumble guy, it's going to help draw in boys to watch this movie
I
because
see.
it's not just about these two sisters because that's boring.
Mm,
But
true.
then I think because it's also having that extra storyline and gives a little bit more depth to Anna. And it is interesting that they do make this guy, which I cannot believe I cannot remember his name, but they do make him a little bit more likable. And how he treats her is kind of, it's funny. And as an
Mhm.
adult, I'm laughing. And so
Yeah.
I think they actually did a good job with that of showing how they do end up together, and it's
Yeah.
more of a believable way than what Disney typically does. So I was
Yeah.
actually proud that like, oh, this is like a real relationship instead of we saw each other and fell in love because they did show the superficial relationship and then show how it destroyed. So I was actually very proud of Disney for kind of
Mhm.
showing different relationships and more of a real one as opposed of how bad a fake one would be.
Yeah. And I have to say, that part of the movie, I remember. I don't remember the guy's name, but Christoph,
Christoph.
thank you. I was just talking to him earlier. We need a camera back there so they can help
Yeah,
us.
yeah.
So Christoph, yeah. So I did like that part,
Mhm.
and I liked Christoph. Um, Now, am I reading too much into the movie, or being too cynical when I say when they focused no longer on the relationship between her and Christoph and more on the sister, especially at the end where the sacrifice happens for the sister and she gets all frozen and whatnot.
Mhm.
My cynical side said, okay, I see what they're doing. They're saying, you don't need a man. Real
Mhm.
love, is in your family or, between, this is about these two women that are very strong women and you don't need a man to save you and you don't need this relationship. It's interesting, but it's just a part of your life. This is the real, I've had some, as I'm watching film, I see a lot of feminism pouring
Mhm.
in that you don't need a man type talk. Am I reading too far into that, or do you think there's a little bit of that?
I think there's a little bit, and I think because Elsa's your main character, And so if you go from her perspective, she doesn't need anybody. She is in charge of herself, and no one can tell her what to do. She was in kind of captivity, staying in her room and being told, like, you're weird, you're different. And then she essentially says, let it go, and sings this whole song about how I'm going to be me and nobody can tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So I think you have that romance, and I think it's a decent relationship between Anna and Kristoff, but I think the story is Elsa and how she doesn't need anybody except herself. She has the power within herself to help everybody, to do everything.
Yeah, I didn't see her like learning a big lesson out of all this.
No, I don't think she does. And I think that's the part. And everybody sings the Let It Go, one of the greatest Disney songs that they did for the audience. But the words are, not very biblical.
Yeah, right.
Just be you and forget the consequences.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the hard part. And Disney's like, oh, we don't care. So they appeal to girls and they show you can do it by yourself. But I think they do also then show that Kristoff does help a lot. So they're doing kind of both stories there, I think, to appeal to a bigger audience.
So let me go back to that idea of consequences, because I think when it comes to Gen Z, which is kids that are between teenagers to 20-some-year-olds, and Gen Alpha, who are anything between elementary school to preteens. When it comes to that generation there, the idea of consequences has become the adults have taught them this. We raise, the government raises minimum wage and then expects everyone just to continue the way they were. They're just getting paid more. But instead, everyone, a bunch of people get fired. They start going to AI computers. You're no longer ordering from a human. You're ordering from a screen because screens are cheaper than humans. So anyway, there's these consequences. And it just seems like in today's world, this idea of consequences seem to always be a surprise. How, as we're talking about, how Disney keeps this going with this non-consequential life that you keep, coming up on. Are there any Disney movies where consequences are demonstrated, where it says, you did this led to this, you've made your bed, you're lying in it?
Well, nothing comes to mind right away. I'm sure there is something. I'm sure people listening to this will be like, this one. But right now, I can't really think of something that is so consequential that it's has changed. It could have ended this way, but instead it ended this way. I don't know if there's really anything that stands out.
The fact that it's hard to think of one. I mean, maybe some of our listeners are like, what about this one? Like you said, but it's going to be hard to find. And so, with that in mind, as a parent, this little talk we're having isn't designed to say, therefore, do not ever watch, Disney ever again. Get rid of Disney Plus or whatever it is. That's not really the message we're sending. Because Disney's not the only one doing this. No. This is 99% of Hollywood. And I know Angel Studios is starting to create things, but whatever. My point is, as a mother, how do you handle movies like this, or any kind of movie that keeps demonstrating lack of consequence? How do you watch a movie with your kids?
So I'm going to go back. I do what my parents did, is you see it, and then I don't ever stop the movie and say, see, what they're doing is wrong. But I will say, this is entertainment and this is make-believe. So we always know what they're seeing is make-believe. It's not real. And then we talk about what is reality. I mean, I'm doing this right now with genders. Boys are boys, girls are girls. No matter what you might see in a movie, and unfortunately it's popping up more and more and more, and you have to be so careful with what your students are seeing or what your kids are seeing. And but just going to, a boy is a boy, and this is why it's a boy, because the Bible says this and Scripture says this. And so if you keep putting those truths in front of them, that they know when they see this, they should start to catch on, oh, that's not real. Or that boy likes this boy, which again pops up all of a sudden in something, and you can turn off. But again, you don't want to make a big deal about it, because then they focus on that. But just constantly, I'm trying to constantly tell them what is Scripture truth. and trying to do, because I know that's what our parents did to us with the 4
Mhm.
kids, and it really, all of us kind of understood that and stuck with it, and it wasn't, we could still watch things and understand that's wrong, and have a feeling of like, oh, that relationship, or oh, they're together and they're not married, or different things
Mhm.
like that. So you can't shelter your kids. If shelter kids, don't watch anything
Mhm.
that the world produces. But there are some things and fun and entertainment, and they can enjoy and have cute little stories from it. But they know it's make believe,
Mm.
and I mean they're into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles right now.
Yes.
So we definitely know turtles are not real. But I even say, because they're kind of like these teenagers who are kind of annoying. And so I try to say, these, are their actions really good? What they're doing, is that kind to each other? And
Yeah. Okay, well, let me ask you this then. You brought up the LGBTQ movement that is alive and well, and I don't think it will matter who the president is. A lot of people are really excited that Trump is president because now all of that will go away. And although there's a lot of DEI stuff that's disappearing and all that, the LGBTQ movement is not going anywhere because Christ has not come back and fixed things. And as long as the fall continues, um, man is always going to slouch towards Sodom and Gomorrah. So, first, let's talk about what kind of things you've seen in Disney films that has started to promote this movement. And then we'll talk about how we can respond to that. But first, tell me, what has Disney been doing to promote LGBTQ stuff?
well, I'm thinking, rewatching films that I watched when I was younger, and you start to see characters that they have put in there that you're like, oh, I wonder if they made them like this. And when I was watching it, we did not think of the LGBTQ. There was nothing like
Mhm.
that, or nothing was blatant. But now you look back, and so if these people from today's eyes are looking at these films, they're like, "Oh, that character probably likes other men because of
Mhm.
how he dressed." And when I watch it, I never would have thought about that. But now that it's
Yeah.
constantly before us, so I think now Disney has conditioned the people enough to see these kind of effeminate characters that are men, and different things, that now they will put it in there. There was, on my kids watch the Disney Kids, so their
Mhm.
accounts are the kid accounts, so everything should be safe. And they're watching these little episodes of the movie Baymax, and they loved that movie, and so they're watching these little episodes that they did. And we started watching, and this guy was liked another guy, and I thought,
Mm.
oh, like, and we turned it off right away. And I thought, that's so sad, because they got them to really loving this character.
Yeah.
So now all these shows, and so that that made me sick. It really made me sick. I'm like, there are things on the kids' Disney that they cannot touch. And there are some other films that have come out recently that deal with topics that I'm like, my kids should never have to see that.
Mhm.
But they hype them so well, or they get them to love a character, so they can easily put this in and then accept it all.
Yeah. And isn't that the way I mean, it's an ingenious move. You don't want to start out before you've even bought into
Mhm.
the story or the character and then introduce that too quickly. You want them to buy in.
Mhm.
You want them to know what's going to happen next so they can tolerate something. Because that's the whole I what I've seen agenda behind a lot of this. How do we get people just to tolerate this?
Mhm.
We know the parents, especially Christian parents, are going to be hoity-toity about all this, but if we can just get them connected to the story, connected to the character, get their kids connected to it, and if they're, crummy enough parents, they'll want to please their kid no matter what. And so they go, okay, we'll tolerate this, and then we'll tolerate that, and then we'll tolerate this. And so you can see how that works so well. But I've also noticed something a little more subtle that has, I think, helped the LGBTQ movement, which is how Disney deals with fathers. Um, the very, I don't want to call it first, the only relationship that has never had a beginning is father and son. It's God the Father and God the Son, witnessed by the Holy Spirit, has never began. It's just always been. There was never a time where the father said, "Okay, you're going to be the son now." Um, it's always been so that you have this relationship that then becomes. I mean, fatherhood really does steer um, kind of how society is going to go. Um, because what fatherhood really talks about, when we're talking about fatherhood, we're really talking about authority. I mean, that's where the word patriarchy comes from, father rule. And so if you come from a society where there's obedience to scripture and the father is ruling the home as he should, in love to his family, and there's submission going on with the kids and the wife, and all that sort of stuff is happening as Ephesians 5 tells us. We have a society that starts to understand authority really well. You start eroding what a father is supposed to be, that he's kind of goofy, that he's kind of just like a kid that mama has to take care of, or whatever it is. Then you start to get a peek into what they think of authority. Are there films that Disney has done that makes that obvious, that dad's a dork, or dad doesn't know what he's talking about, that kind of lead people to this idea?
I think a lot of their films are like that. That because we want to laugh at the dad, and oh, it's all fun, and then you really look at it and it's like, oh yeah, he's no one's paying attention to what he's saying, or what he's saying doesn't really mean anything. We just are going to laugh him off. I cannot think of the name, but it's one of the fish. They're like sea creatures, and then when they get on land, they look human, and then they go back in the water. Luca.
Luca,
Yes.
yeah.
And I think about, I mean, that dad was played by a comedian. And so he's supposed to be funny, and he really is he's probably the weakest character. Like the mom is the one, and the grandma, and those are the women who are dealing with the son more than this kind of goofy dad that we just laugh at. So that example, I mean, that happens so many times of the goofy father that we don't really need to pay attention to.
You mentioned already Nemo, Finding Nemo, another moron that doesn't know what he's
Complete
doing,
moron,
but trying
yeah.
to figure it out. And then there's the one, I can't remember the name of it, but where the dad ends up just being a pair of pants because he was
I
supposed
don't know if
to.
I've seen that one.
He was supposed to. They were looking for their dad had, I think, died, and they were trying to bring him back. And right halfway through bringing him back, the spell fell apart, and so only his pants were there. So they're trying to
no.
they're trying to get the rest of their dad there so they could have a conversation with him for one last time. And it just, over and over, as you see what people think of fatherhood, you see what people think of authority. And this has been reinforced. You can read full books about how social media has degraded the idea of authority, and then reinforced the idea of as an individual, I'm the authority.
Yeah. Yep.
And nothing will be good until I am the authority. I mean, it's very Marxist, and I understand all that, but I think it's also just very satanic. To despise the one relationship that is best understood through God. Now I want to get really practical with our last few minutes. As parents, we watch all this. We've heard about all these horror stories of Disney, and there's still some good stuff out there. The first Incredibles, I think, is a good story.
And then they made the dad weak in the second Incredibles.
Of course,
because we need to do that.
That's right. The second Incredibles, of course, is the apology. We are so sorry we made men look masculine, and protective and providing. Anyway. But the first one is pretty good. But I think I've heard you say this before. The first one really wasn't Disney at all, was it?
No, it was not Disney made or produced. Essentially, it was Danny Bird, or I think that's his name, wrote it, and then Disney bought it from him. So, but they didn't really change what he did. So it was not part of Disney in the beginning.
So the second one really tells you where Disney is.
Then Disney took complete control over the second one.
Okay.
Yes.
So the kind of message we're giving here, the worldview that's been raised up against the knowledge of God that we're trying to get people to understand is there's a worldview out there that sees parents as fools, authority as a threat, not a comfort. Manhood and fatherhood should be diminished. Romance should be based on things that make you personally happy, whether it's looks or whether it's someone's personality. If that pleases you, that's romance. So we see these kind of worldviews. As parents, what would you tell parents to do specifically to guard their home? There's some parents, and understandably, are going to say, we're done with Disney. We're never going to watch another Disney movie again. And I don't think that's going to hurt anybody. That's fine. But what about parents that say, well, we're still going to watch movies, but how do I guard my kids? What would you say to them?
Always do devotions with your kids. Always have scripture. If you're going to let them watch movies, make sure they're also understanding how important the Bible is. And like with our kids, we go through a storybook that I went through when I was younger. And just talking through the stories. They have the pictures and talking through the stories. And I think understanding this is real life. Like I was saying before, like this is make-believe. This is, God didn't put this together. God put the Bible together. And I think that is so important to constantly making sure that they have that balance of the word, and family devotions are a huge part of that. And I think starting it early, then they just get in a habit. And I know some nights the kids get to bed really late, and we're like, oh no, we have school tomorrow. And my 7-year-old would say, oh, but we didn't read the Bible yet. I'm like, you feel horrible. But I'm like, I'm so proud of him too, that was like, oh, this is part of our routine that we're reading Bible stories and we're talking about these. So I think we try to emphasize, we'll watch the movie and it's fun. And they're into Star Wars as well too. So, they do the lightsabers, but then we talk about, okay, what did you learn at church? What did you learn at school? Because they go to Christian school. What did you do? And make that such a priority.
Yeah. We have had several people on the show already, and when I get to that point where I say, what would you tell parents out there? You are like the third or fourth person that has said family devotions. That is so important. And I'm not saying that, for you fathers out there, I know you might be thinking, well, my wife handles that. And I'm not saying, the wife can't, lead in family devotions with their kids. But as a head of your home, this should be the priority. Even if you say, well, mommy's going to read and then I'll talk about it, or whatever it is, however you want to split it up, the kids should know this is a priority for dad. Because what it does, and I think this is so vital and importance, because even my kids do this. They'll say, right before we go to bed, even if it's late, they'll say, oh, you're supposed to read the Bible. Now, with my kids, they're doing that because they don't want to go to bed.
Yeah.
Because my kids are evil, but you probably have better kids.
Oh.
And they'll even listen to the Bible. Just stay up a little later. But it's so vital because, and I think this is something, if you haven't listened to anything yet, please listen to this. I believe that we have, with family devotions, you are teaching your kids, okay, it's reality time. You have been living in non-reality for most of your day. If you've been playing with your Switch, or you've been watching movies, or you've just been playing outside, 90% of their day is fantasy. Aside from whatever they're doing in school or homeschool or whatever that is, what they enjoy the most is fantasy. And that's part of their imagination, and that's fine. I get it. But to end the day by saying, okay, everybody, you had your school work, which is really important, and you've had your fantasy time. Now we're going to get back to what's real. And I really believe that devotions tells your kids, okay, there's a difference here. When I watch a movie, I know I'm entering into not real. But when Dad gets the Bible out and we talk, okay, that's real. I think that is a vital contrast that we are losing in our homes, because kids are starting, if you're not told, if it's not obvious to the kid that, okay, that was fake, this is going to be real, they will start mixing in their mind what's real and what's fake. And if Satan has his way, social media, the movies they watch, is going to be what Satan is going to be telling them. This is what's real because this feels the best to your heart.
Yes.
When you see Prince Eric looking out into the ocean, that's what you know you really want. Or when you see, Ariel finally get her legs and she's this beautiful girl, that's what you really want. And that's what's offered to us in the fantasy world. And again, I think these things can be managed if the kids are clear about what's real and what's fake, and they are constantly pushed. Because I think even Sunday morning needs, and I know that a lot of parents are worried that their kids don't like church. They don't. I think a lot of kids don't like church because church has not created a Lego movie for them to watch on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we're asking them to enter into reality first thing in the morning. We're asking them to enter into reality that isn't going to be super entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry about churches that worry about how entertaining they are, especially to kids, because what the kids start learning is the fantasy has to come into the reality too.
Yeah, cater to me.
Yes, please me, And I'm not saying that the more boring your church is, the better. I mean, obviously, there are churches that believe that.
Yeah.
Because I've been to churches that definitely believe that. And we are proud of how dull this is. But I do think that we do need that contrast for them, that they know, okay, this might seem a little more boring than what life usually is like, but this is real. With the experience you've had with your kids, how do you see fantasy fighting against what we're trying to teach them about reality? Do you see that in their normal life?
Oh my goodness. They love fantasy. They love making up battles and scenarios. And I mean, two boys, they fight all the time. And, but it's like they want to. It's the fighting of we're going to wrestle and we're this guy. And, I mean, that they would live in that world if we didn't bring them out of it. And I love it. I mean, I love the make-believe, and that's the development of it. But yeah, you have to bring them to. My one son was doing one to the other one, and he was doing. I'm like, okay, maybe we're going a little too far in your play here. I'm like, like that doesn't happen, or you can never do that. Oh, I know, it's just playing. I'm like, well, let's maybe not play that way. And so bring them back some, because they really can just go off and they soak up everything that they see. They soak up, and so that's where I love movies and we watch movies, but you have to have that balance. And during the school days, we don't watch anything because I know that is now taking precedence of everything else. So I try weekends are the special, which makes them get up before they normally would for school on a Saturday because they know they can watch movies on Saturday morning. But trying to, I want to encourage their fantasy and their play, but I also want to be aware of what they're doing to bring it back in, because maybe something stuck out to them that shouldn't have in a film, and they're taking that with them now.
We ran into that. My daughter and my son, my little ones, sometimes they play house. And so they really like the idea of going to work and all that sort of stuff. And my little one, Olivia, she had one of her baby dolls, and she said, "Okay, Jude, that's my little son, you're going to stay home and I'm going to go to work." And I heard her say that. I said, "Okay, no. You don't even get to play that way. Jude, you will never be a stay-at-home dad."
I think we have different views on this a little bit, but that's okay. But I get what you're saying here, though. Yeah.
And I know we live in a time where, you can work from home, and I get all that junk, but I just, they're already, I guess the moral of the story is pay attention to both the amount of fantasy they're exposed to and the amount of fantasy they're dealing with, but also how they're doing it. I mean, paying attention to how they play, what they play, that kind of thing, I think is super important. Not merely just we're going to keep an eye on those Disney films, but really getting involved with how do we insert ourselves into their play. And I don't mean like Bluey, where you have to be the star of their play at every second of the day, which is insane. But really, just everything has to be intentional. Everything, if I can put it this way, as a parent, everything has to be by choice, not by chance. We can learn anything from Disney. I think that's what we should learn. So I hope that's helpful to you. I hope you've learned something from this, and please join us again next time on the Renton Rathman Show.